Greetings, Earthers, Martians, Belters, members of the OPA. Welcome to episode 8 of Expanse, the Unofficial podcast. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and joining me on the show today, Nikki Starwalker.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to episode 8, Nikki.
Yay, thank you.
So last episode, episode 7, we talked about the pilot of the TV show, which we were fortunate enough to watch online. And if you haven't seen it yet, definitely go see it. We may have some viewers joining us from episode 6 who may have skipped episode 7 because they didn't want to be spoiled on the first episode. I do have some good news, though, for people in Germany. So on the last episode, we were talking about how people in Germany were region locked and could not watch the episode on YouTube. They couldn't watch it on sci-fi.com. They couldn't watch it on Space. I think it's space.com, Canada's space television station. But I have since found out that if you're in Germany, you can watch The Expanse on the Facebook page.
Excellent.
So I'll have a link to that in the show notes. If you go to Sci-Fi's Facebook page for The Expanse, they have the video there as well. The Facebook one supposedly is not region locked. I did hear from listener Dominic Droscher. I'm sure I said that wrong. I'm terrible with umlauts. He let me know on Twitter that you can watch the Facebook one in Germany. He's in Germany. So if you're not in the US or Canada and you've had problems watching it, maybe try it on the Facebook page.
Okay, great.
I know me sending people to Facebook. You never thought this would happen.
No.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Also, while we're doing our little announcements at the beginning of the show, I want to send a thank you and a shout out to ROK Kane for your 5-star review on iTunes. ROK Kane says, great podcast. Want a good Expanse podcast? Look no further. Lots of good info and content. Each episode gets better, especially as we near the official premiere. Thanks for putting this together. So thank you, Rock Kane. I'm just gonna call you for the review. We really appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks.
So today, we don't have another episode to talk about. We got to wait until December 15th to see the second episode of The Expanse.
Aww.
So what we're going to do is continue our discussion of the various actors and characters involved with the show. And I've been kind of worried about this one. Just because I am so afraid I'm going to butcher this woman's name. But for my prep for today, I went and found every YouTube interview and video I could find, and I've listened to about 3 other people say it. So today, we are talking about Shohreh Aghdashloo.
Sweet.
And that's the best I can do. I also cannot roll my R's. So yeah, I just fail at foreign languages in general. But can't do the umlauts, can't roll my R's. So Shohreh is playing Chrisjen Avasarala, and we did see her in the first episode, and she did a phenomenal job.
And looked awesome.
Yes. And we've already talked about Avasarala quite a bit on previous episodes. We talked about her quite a bit on episode 7, as far as her performance in that episode. So to get us started, Nikki, why don't you tell us a little bit about Shohreh Aghdashloo and maybe some things we've seen her in before?
Sure. So she has been in the BBC HBO miniseries House of Saddam.
Okay.
And that got her a lot of acclaim, so you might have seen her in that. She was also in The House of Sand and Fog, which was a movie. And she received an Academy Award nomination for her role. And she was in The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Oh, I saw that movie.
Yeah? Do you remember her?
No, it was so long ago, and that movie really kind of freaked me out. So, yeah, I don't remember. It's too long. I mean, I can't remember anybody that was in that movie. It was so long ago.
Yeah.
Cool. At least that's something I've seen.
Oh, you've seen more.
Okay.
She was in X-Men: The Last Stand.
Oh.
And she was also in The Nativity Story and The Odd Life of Timothy Green.
Do you know which X-Men movie that was? They all kind of blur together to me. They're all so...
Yeah, I don't remember where it fell in
which one that... Because I know I've seen them all. So
okay.
What character did she play in that?
She played Dr. Kavita Rao, which I could be pronouncing that incorrectly. If so, I'm sorry.
I wonder if that's the one where Wolverine was in Japan.
That could be.
Because I think... I don't know. I'd better stop because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I've seen all the X-Men movies, but they all kind of blur together for me.
Same here. Yeah. Same here. Something else that a listener might know is she was in 24. And she was also, she did some voiceovers for games.
Oh.
She was in Mass Effect 2 and 3. She did voices there. And she was in Law and Order. She was on NCIS for an episode. So she's done a lot of like little episodes here and there too.
Cool.
As well as big roles.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I watch a lot of sci-fi, obviously. And it's so funny because a lot of times we'll be watching some TV show and I'll see some actor that I've only seen in, say, like Star Trek: The Next Generation. And this actor maybe played an alien and had all kinds of prosthetics on and everything, to where, you could never recognize them as themselves in a regular TV show. But I will recognize the actor from their voice. And I know I've amazed you more than once where I'm like, oh my God, that's so-and-so from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Yeah. I recognize their voice. And a lot of times I'll get the thing where I hear their voice and it's like on the tip of my brain. It's like, I know who this person is. And like, I cannot rest until I make the connection and remember who this person is.
It does amaze me because you do that under layers of makeup.
Yeah.
And you can't tell who's under the costume. But you're like, I know who that is. It's so-and-so.
Well, it's because of the voice. Because their voice is the same, right? And, I do that with people that don't have I guess everybody's voice is distinctive. I mean, obviously, or I wouldn't be able to tell them apart. But they don't have like James Earl Jones, I always bring him up. Like he has a voice where that man could just make money with his voice, right?
Yeah.
Shohreh is like that. Like her voice, you don't have to really be tuned in to recognize her. And it's very distinctive and very powerful. And I'm glad that she's done some voiceover work for games because she'd be great at that kind of thing. Her and Cass need to do a game together sometime.
That'd would be great. I'd love that. Where I know her voice from is, this is going to tell you something, is from Destiny. She is the voice of Lakshmi too.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. That's where I knew her voice from. I had to look it up because
what was the character?
Crazy. She's in the tower, I think, and she's just an NPC that you talk to.
You don't remember which NPC she was?
I could see her face, but she's just one of the more robotic
you know what?
characters.
I think she was the future war cult person.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember talking. Yeah. See, there you go.
Yeah.
I didn't even like that video game, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember her voice in there now. Giving me my missions that I refuse to do. But yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
One other cool genre TV show that she was a part of is Grimm.
Oh, okay. Any other movies or anything else we might recognize her from?
Not that I saw.
Okay. So that's quite a bit. You've probably seen her or heard her in something. So we can talk about her character, Chrisjen Avasarala, who works for Earth, for the United Nations of Earth. And I don't remember off the top of my head what her actual title is at this point in the story, but she's pretty high up in the UN. She's one of the movers and shakers, and she has a lot of political power, which is interesting because so far in the show, none of the other characters have any political power whatsoever. A lot of them, you could even argue whether or not they even have any real power over their own lives and destinies, but definitely not in the political arena. So it's kind of interesting because through this character, we get to see a whole side of the story that we would never see otherwise. Because, Holden isn't going to be going to any cabinet meetings or anything.
Right. Yeah. And her character, her whole thing is that she's gotten to where she is in the highest ranks of the UN without ever having to go through an election.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that or I forgot it.
Right. So she never stood for an election, and she's just that good.
Yeah. She's very cunning and
manipulative.
Yeah, I was going to say Machiavellian in a good way. Like, I don't mean that as like disparaging her character, but all of the good elements of that. Well, actually, kind of all the way Machiavellian. I mean, she gets what she wants through just being smarter than everybody else in the room and knowing how to pull people's strings and manipulate people and call in favors and just whatever she has to do.
Yep, she knows how to cultivate a relationship and then really take advantage of it.
Yeah. So she's a really interesting character. As far as in the books, she's not in the first book at all. She does, through the story, become a bigger and bigger part of the story. I think that the first book that she's in, she's not, I mean, she's part of the story, but she's not like what I would consider one of the main characters of the story. But as we go further through the story, she definitely becomes one. So that is one of the interesting changes that we're seeing with the TV show compared to the books is, she's in it from minute one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it will be really interesting to see what they do with her and how much screen time she gets in this first season. And one thing that's interesting, I'm not going to go into any details for anyone who hasn't seen the first episode and skipped episode 7. I'm not going to spoil you now. But the first scene, I think it's the first scene that we see her in the first episode, is actually a scene that takes place in the books. It just takes place in a later book, the scene with her and her grandchildren, which is not a spoiler, I should hope. She has grandchildren. So that was interesting, right? Like we're bringing her in at a very different time, but the scene was almost exactly the same as described in the book. Now, the scene after that, I don't believe was in the book. I don't remember that scene. So it will be interesting, the scenes that we get with her in this first season, how many of them are scenes like the one that wasn't in the book that we saw in the first episode, where it's something that they create for the TV show that wasn't in the books, and how many are scenes from later books that they're just going to use earlier. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm kind of beating around the bush here, but the scene that I'm talking about that I don't think was in the books did exactly what I was theorizing they were going to use her character to do, which is to kind of tell us a little bit more about the conflict between Earth and Mars and the belt, and to kind of clue us in the stakes involved, right? That this isn't just a petty trade dispute like fucking Star Wars. This is like a big deal. This is high level stuff that we're dealing with.
Yeah,
So,
and not to bash on Star Wars. Obviously, we're fans.
I'm fans of episodes 4 through 6 for sure.
Okay.
1 through 3, there were a few moments that were pretty awesome, and the rest of it was pretty terrible. Especially that opening crawl for episode 1, where they start talking about trade disputes. I mean, as psyched as I was seeing that in the theater, I was like, what the fuck is this? Am I going to be watching representatives on the House floor? And well, actually, that pretty much happened. Wow.
All right. Well, to get back to Chrisjen,
yes,
I found 2 sentences on Sci-Fi's website just to give you a little more interesting look at her backstory. Martian separatists assassinated her father during a period of social unrest. Her son, a Marine, died in the line of duty while defending Earth from Belter revolutionaries. So she's already been affected by this conflict between the Martians and the Belters.
Where's that coming from?
This
What's the
is
source?
Sci-Fi's website.
Oh,
They have
okay,
pages on the cast, and of course, this is her page.
Okay. Yeah, I'm honestly, I've said I'm doing the reread of the books, so I'm honestly not sure if that has been revealed in the books or not, or all of that has or not.
Okay. Well, if you feel it's a spoiler, feel free to take it out.
I mean, it's on their general information. It's not a spoiler. It's background information. I'm just not sure if that was actually in the books or if they have some additional information that wasn't in the books. I really don't remember, but
Yeah.
I'm doing the reread, so I'll find out.
Okay. Yeah. So I just feel like her character in the show, just from the first episode, is already more ruthless than the character that I read in the books.
Okay.
And it could just be because I'm not that far into the books yet.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I
Okay.
think if you'd read as much as I had, you might not think that.
Okay.
She's definitely a character that she has a lot of layers, I think. And as the story progresses, you realize that there's a lot more to her than maybe you at first gave her credit. But again, I don't want to say too much because I don't even know if I could spoil anything because, we don't know what they're going to do with these characters. And
Right.
we shouldn't assume that they're going to be exactly like they are in the book. James S.A. Corey made a tweet this week, something along the lines of how many times he's heard from people who thought that Holden had blonde hair.
Yeah.
And how, as a writer, you just have no control over how people perceive your characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because nowhere in any of the books did it ever say that he had blonde hair. This is an assumption that people make, and I think is very illuminating as to people's preconceptions and their own biases.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe he's described as having blue eyes.
Oh, okay.
And so maybe people just assume.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely, because I actually went back because when I saw Stephen Strait, I was like, wow, that's not what I pictured as Holden. And I didn't really picture Holden as blonde.
Mm-hmm.
I pictured him with kind of sandy brown hair. But I definitely pictured like the kind of like, I don't know, like an Indiana farmer guy or truck driver, like the big kind of stocky, bluff-faced, iron-jawed, kind of like I definitely, for him, it was funny. I had a very distinct image in my mind of what I thought he looked like. And I remember you and I talking when they announced Stephen Strait, and I was like, oh, he doesn't look anything like I pictured Holden. And you were like, well, he doesn't really go against the description or whatever. And I actually went and found the description that's given, which is not much of a description, which probably is part of the problem here is, you leave too many gaps for people to fill in, and they are going to fill them in, and you can't control what they fill them in with. I went back and looked at the description, and my image actually didn't really fit the description that was given.
Interesting.
And Stephen Strait did, other than maybe the eye color.
Okay.
And I'm not 100% certain that it says he has blue eyes. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that I had an idea in my head that actually did not fit the words on the page. And it sounds like a lot of other people had ideas in their heads that didn't fit the word on the page. And then we see Stephen Strait and we're like, oh, that doesn't look like him.
Yeah, I was so convinced that he had blonde hair that I would swear to you it's somewhere in the books. And I totally believe you that it's not. That's how convinced I was.
Well, I don't know 100% sure that it's not. I just know that in the one description I found of him in the first book, it doesn't say what color his hair is.
Yeah.
So, and that's a thing, like I don't know how much people care about writing. Like I always get on these writing tangents, but there's been a shift in popular writing away from a lot of description. And I think for the most part, it's a good thing. Like I still am a huge fan of the Wheel of Time series of books by Robert Jordan. And he was kind of from the old guard where he would give you a page of description right down to what the person's clothes look like, how their hair was done, the sound of their voice. And he did it very well. Like, it wasn't, at least for me, it wasn't boring to, like, I've read terrible descriptions that are really long and boring to read, but his weren't like that. Like, they were very detailed. But the tendency nowadays in like popular fiction, or at least genre fiction, I don't really read just normal fiction, but at least in genre fiction, is to do a lot less with descriptions. And you'll read some books where there are pretty much no descriptions, especially of like the protagonist, like point of view main character. There may be no description at all. And all you know is maybe the gender of the character. And you only know that because they're saying he or she, there's never any description. Or if there is, it's very vague, and that's how the Expanse books are. I think we get a fairly decent description of Naomi and I think Alex in the first book, but like the one on Holden is kind of like, a couple details, like I think like eye color, and he's stocky because he's an earther, but it's not like this word picture or word painting of the person. And, I mean, people can go on and on theorizing like why that is or why we're doing it that way now.
Right.
Part of it is just because it's boring to read descriptions. And I think it was James S.A. Corey actually on Twitter this week. I don't know what book he was talking about, but he must have been reading some book and said something about, don't in the first page of a book give me all this description about a character I don't care about yet.
Right.
And that's something you and I have talked about because, there's this kind of thinking of, well, don't describe a character until we care about that character because we don't care, right? We're either going to be bored reading that or we're going to skip it, right? But the thing is kind of the time you need to describe a character is the first time you introduce that character. Because if you wait until we care, then I already have my own mental image built, and your words on the page aren't going to change my image that I've already built over however many chapters of reading your book, right? So you kind of have that first opportunity to get a description across, and if you don't do it then you risk kicking the reader out of the story later because you're describing something different than what they're picturing. So kind of the middle ground or the way to like do the best you can is to do a really short, brief description and just use like not even a whole sentence or just a few words, to get across a couple things about this person and then move on. And then that way you hopefully give them enough that their mental image is somewhat close to what you're picturing as a writer, but you're not losing them or irritating them with description that they don't want.
Yeah.
So that's just something I've noticed as a reader is, I think it was the Scalzi books. I think I went through like the first book, like Old Man's War, and I don't think he ever really described the main character, like at all.
Yeah, he doesn't describe much. And in my personal opinion as a reader, I like more description. I'm a very visual person though, and I don't mind reading about their hair color and their clothing and things like that. But I do understand that going on for pages is too much.
Well, even that though, I mean, how are you going to be talking about a character and tell me everything that they're wearing and their hair color and their eye color and their complexion and make that somehow relevant to what's going on without doing the tired cliche of, oh, they're looking in the mirror, like admiring themselves, thinking about what they look like, right? Like there's really no way to do it without it kind of killing the momentum and being like, oh, now we're going to describe this person. Something that Robert Jordan did that I really liked when I saw that, I was like, okay, from now on, every fantasy book needs to do this, is he had a glossary at the back of the book where he would have things defined. So, you'd be reading the book and someone would mention Aes Sedai and you're like, what the hell's an Aes Sedai? And if you didn't want to wait to find out in the story, you could go back and read the little thing about what they were. And it was a way for him to give you some more background in the world without having it in the story. And the other great thing about it was he had pronunciations. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, from now on, if you're going to make up some fucked up name that's not immediately obvious how it's pronounced, you owe us a pronunciation so we know how to pronounce it. So maybe we could do like, what is it? Like in plays they do it. It's called like dramatis personae or something like that, where it lists all the main characters and tells you a little bit about each character.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have something like that at the beginning or the back of the book and have all your descriptions there and not even have it in the story at all. So it's like if I'm reading and Holden comes on stage and I care what he looks like, I can stop, I can flip to the front or the back and read his description. Or if I don't care, I can just keep going.
Interesting idea.
And the other nice thing about not having the big descriptions or even any descriptions, because you might say, oh, well, there's no description of the main character. Like that's a fail on the part of the author. And it's not, it's a choice. And kind of one of the ideas behind that is you come up with your own description, right? And so if I'm reading a story about this main character and I'm Caucasian, which I am, I'm probably going to imagine him as Caucasian, right? But if I'm Latino, I might imagine him as Latino. Or if I'm Black, I might imagine him as Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't matter to the story, then why define that? And then that way the reader can more identify with the character because they can imagine the character as looking however they want them to look. And maybe, the book says so-and-so comes on stage and so-and-so's a badass. And I think, well, in my book, all badasses have dreadlocks. So now for me, this character has dreadlocks. And that for me makes him a badass, So I don't need the author saying, no, he's bald, No, he's got dreadlocks, man. That's cool. But then the problem, right, is when you go to a visual medium, because then, actors look like something, right?
Right.
An actor can't just be whatever you want them to be. And so then, you have a book where there's no descriptions. It's like, yeah, we can cast anything for that. But chances are everybody's going to be like, that's not what I pictured, because everybody pictured something different because there's no descriptions.
Yeah. And I really felt, again, when I read the books, like James S.A. Corey thought of these things and wrote the books with the screen in mind.
Yeah, and I think the descriptions are there. It's like the one Holden, I missed it or just forgot it right after I read it, the first time I read it. But when I went and looked for it, it was there. Because I remember we had a little disagreement about Naomi, because I was in like the second or third book and I'm like, I have no idea what Naomi looks like. They never described her. And you're like, yeah, they did. And sure enough, they did in the first book. And I went and found it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there's actually a really good description of her in a lot more detail than some of the other characters. Mm-hmm. But I was probably just really into what was happening.
Right.
And I just skimmed. I'm like, oh, I don't care about this. I don't care what she looks like. I care what happens. I care what she says. I don't care what she looks like. And so I just, I either skipped it or skimmed it or whatever, but it didn't sink in.
Okay.
So interesting stuff.
Yeah, I do something different when I read. Each little description I'll just gnaw on forever and like absorb and reread. I really care about them for some reason.
Now, I guess we haven't talked about how Shohreh fits our views of Avasarala. I have to say, for me personally, she looks way too young and she's way too pretty. I always pictured this little old lady. And she is, this powerful, vital woman, Mm-hmm. But I'm okay with that. I like their version better than my version that I had in my head. I think she's awesome.
Okay. I actually think she's perfect. Like she stepped out of the book for me.
Oh,
that's exactly how I pictured the character. So, and I love her voice and I'm very excited to see her in the rest of it.
Yeah, me too. So I guess we'll kind of wrap this up. We'll keep this a little shorter this week. We really did a marathon last week talking about the first episode.
Yeah.
So definitely let us know what you think about Avasarala, what you think of her as a character. Are you fans of her like Nikki and I are? And also let us know what you thought of the pilot if you watched it. You can reach us by email at expansepodcast@gmail.com. I'm on Google+. You can search for Lex Starwalker.
You can search for Nikki Starwalker to find me.
And I'm also on Twitter at Lex Starwalker.
I'm at Nikki Starwalker.
And yeah, there's our stats. Visit our website, starwalkerstudios.com. There you can find the show notes for this and all of the episodes of this show. We'll have some links for more information on Shohreh Aghdashloo if you'd like to learn more about her. And again, I'll have a link to the video on Facebook if you haven't been able to see the first episode of The Expanse yet. And again, in episode 7, I actually embedded the YouTube video in episode 7 in the show notes. And I also have the link to it on Sci-fi's website. So there's quite a few places you can see it online. Also Amazon Prime, PlayStation, Xbox, like it's all over the place. So
you can't miss it.
Yeah, if you're having problems because you're in a country that's region locked, try the Facebook one. And if that doesn't work, try other places. I guarantee you, if you look hard enough, you can find some way to watch it because it's everywhere at this point.
And you can also follow Shohreh on Twitter. She's now on Twitter, and we will provide that link in the show notes as well.
Yes, absolutely. So until next week, conserve your oxygen and your water. Resources are precious in the outer solar system.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
Flip and burn, baby. Flip and burn.